John used to shake his head like that. Boys and girls, why was I listening to one of my favorite Beatles songs? Well, because I love music. And we've been talking about something called poetry. And you know what? Poetry is like music. I don't mean that when you start, reading a poem, all of a sudden a music track comes on, or that, all poetry is made into a song. What I mean to say is basically that poets write poems in such a way that it makes us kind of think about music. They write their poetry thinking about how it would sound musically. Now, if you remember last time I said that basically um, one thing that poets do is that they look at things around them or hear things around them, perceive, touch even things around them in a different way. They look through different eyes. What do we learn? It's not just a pencil sharpener. It's like as if there were 100 bees inside, okay, going ahead and sharpening the lead, or I should say the graphite in the pencil. Now, so that's, one ingredient when it comes to writing poems, because poetry is like cooking or baking. It has ingredients. And again, the first ingredient for us would be like look around you or hear or sense, feel, and perceive things to be more than what they are. Okay? Like the sun is, well, it's not just the sun, it's a glowing, warm, honey colored orb. And we talked about that last time. In fact, you should have made a list where you looked around you and you put words underneath objects and what they made you think of. Okay? So, but the second ingredient of making poetry, like baking a cake or making a good meal, is that basically you make it in such a way that it becomes musical almost, or maybe it does, when the person reads it. In fact, there are quite a few songs that started as poems. I can think of, for example, Turn, 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 which comes from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Tanakh, sometimes called the Old Testament. And somebody years ago made it into a song, and there are several versions of that song, and it uses those words, okay? And it was basically poetry. So again, boys and girls, today I want to show you how when you write a poem, yeah, it's in a way being musical. You're kind of making a song. But what happens if you write a poem and it doesn't really do that? What would it look like? I'm going to show you. If you look on the board in red, there is basically something that, well, this is from a poem that was written by somebody, but I wrote it down in just a sentence to show you the difference. Okay? So, take a look. And I put it this way on purpose because I don't want you to see the second part. Sorry. And it says, goldfish flash gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed. But round brown snails stick to the glass and stay. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that if I'm writing a story like you've written. Anything wrong with that? No. But if I'm writing a poem, does that sound like a poem? I hope you said no. Why? It doesn't have a musical quality or sound to it. It just doesn't. If you look at it again, it's just if I were writing in my journal and I just wrote a long sentence. Again, boys and girls, goldfish flash gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed, but round brown snails stick to the glass and stay. And again, yeah, if I'm writing a story, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a poem, though. Not a poem. Poets often will go ahead and they will take their poetry and, of course, divide it into lines. And I think I showed you last time, and in class we've done it too, that basically poets will take a sentence and they just won't write it from, left to right and like that. They'll take parts of the sentence, make it one line, another part, make it another line, another line, another line, and then they put their period. let's look at this poem the way it was really written, not like this. And now we can go ahead and go like that. And shall I move back a little bit? I hope I can. That's better for my head too. Okay, boys and girls, here are the same words, but now written basically as a poem. Okay, hope we can see that pretty well. Now watch what happens. And watch and listen how I read it now that it's arranged in lines like that. Try again, sorry. Goldfish, flash, gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed, but round brown snails stick to the glass and stay. Now, do you see the difference? When I read the top one, I just read it. Goldfish flash gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away, and everything else, right? But the way this poem is written, the way the authoress wrote it, in fact, I want to look her name up, give her credit. Oh, her name is Valerie Worth. Okay? So basically, when Mr. and Mrs. Worth went ahead and did this, she divided the words into lines. And notice again, when words are put into lines by themselves, not just going like that, all the way, it makes you read it a different way. And you know that. Again, watch. Goldfish, flash. Notice, because goldfish and flash are on separate lines, I didn't read it the way I did up here. Goldfish, flash. No. I went ahead and took my time and did it slower. And I tried to do it musically. Goldfish, flash. Gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed. But round brown snails stick to the glass and stay. Did you also notice what happened when I got here? Did you notice, did my voice start to go faster or slower? If you said slower, you're correct. This one, because there are so many words together on one line, I read a little quicker. But this, oh no, these mostly have fewer. Stick to the glass and stay. Can you read this with me? Yes, and I need you to do that, please, girls and boys. And do with me. Let's make it sort of like musical, because it's a poem. Okay, and let the words show you how to read them. A lot of words, a little quicker. Few words, slower. Read with me. 3, 2, 1, 0. Goldfish, flash, gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed. But round brown snails stick to the glass and stay. Were you able to do that with me? I hope you were. And you noticed that basically the way we did it in the blue was a lot different than the red. Because the way it's written in the blue, again, what did she do? She took these words, but she said, you know what? Some of these words need to go by themselves, such as goldfish, flash. But then she said, no, not these. These should go together. Gold and silver scales. They flick and slip away under green weed. And then, again, as you read with me, hopefully you slowed down, but round brown snails, oh, one word by itself, stick to the glass and stay. And doesn't it make sense that we read this part slower? Because we're talking about snails. Snails are slower than fish. So it makes sense that we read this part quicker, but this part slower. This is about fish. This is about snails. So it makes sense. Okay, now that's part one. I'm going to go ahead then and show you in part two another poem. And we're going to see how this one should be written properly. I'll be back.